Hop and Vetiver, Accidental Anarchists, Chapter 8. Don't you ever have anything nice to say? Sea wind buffeted Vetiver as she followed Hop and Corbin's hunched back up the long slope. Rocks studded the uneven ground. If she squinted her eyes open a crack, she could glimpse a white-capped ocean surrounding the small island. A few evergreen trees clustered at the top of the hill, gathered around a gray, weather-beaten wooden cottage as though guarding it. When Corbin opened the cottage door, the wind caught it and nearly tore it from his grasp. Once inside, Vetiver rubbed her hands together. "Is this where you live? It's so bleak." "I prefer solitude most of the time. You might change your mind if it wasn't storming outside."
Esol, will you start a fire?
The layout of the cottage was simple and the furnishings minimalist. The main room served as a combination kitchen, dining room, living room, and study. A wood stove stood in the far corner for cooking and heat. Corbin's room adjoined the main one. The house lacked a bathroom, but there was an outhouse. "It's about 100 feet down the hill," Corbin told them as he filleted some salmon that had been sitting by the sink. "If you need to go, do it before it gets dark." Hop struggled to light the fire. A few coals glowed in the back recesses of the stove, but it was too cold for the driftwood to ignite on contact. He blew on the embers until he was red-faced and breathless. Finally, the wood smoldered into a weak flame. By the time the fire looked like it was going to work, Corbin had salted the fish and placed them in a skillet with plenty of butter. While the brothers worked, Vetiver wandered around the single room. The wooden floorboards and walls were worn and old. A window cut into the wall above the dining table showcased the barren beach and the relentless waves smashing into the island. Hop had dropped the pile of books from Lloyd on the table. Vetiver picked one up and cracked it open. Though a perfect history of both sides of reality is impossible to ascertain, the author has taken it upon himself to give as accurate account as possible in the modern relationship between the two. Thus, the author assumes no responsibility for... She skipped past the introduction. Although it is unknown by exactly what process humans and other creatures from the other side reach our own during sleep, it is apparent that said transfer does happen, and that without the intervention of the administrators, these otherworldly individuals would wreak havoc upon every member of this side. For in slumber, humans bring instability to our universe. Circumventing the laws of man and nature, their psyches agitate the world around them into a restless turmoil. So much so that it is impossible to live a productive day while trying to navigate the ensuing fantastical scenarios. Life as usual is hindered greatly in such an unstable environment. The economy falters and is gradually wiped out. This effect can be seen in isolated areas today. Fortunately, with the establishment of unstable zones countless years ago, administrators have been able to minimize this issue. Humans are excluded to vast wastes of instability where they are free to unconsciously create worlds where anything is possible. By bending the laws of perception and morphing wherever the dreamer turns, what seems like an entire city can fit comfortably on an acre of unstable land. Humans, then, are free to chase their tails through mazes of their own construction. This method contains nearly all terrestrials, but, as with everything, there are exceptions. Sometimes, improbably, a human will wander into another's world, causing little fuss, except for the two people inhabiting the illusion. More problematic are the cases in which abnormally inquisitive humans escape the wastes of instability and wander onto stable territory. Once there, these aberrants disturb the peace and generally cause a mess. An administrator's job is to handle such situations. Some herd the dreamers back to instability by fear or dread, or the feeling of an impenetrable wall. Some seek to improve the mental states of dreamers, so they are satisfied with their own dream space. Many administrators simply kill anomalies, which sends them back to their own side of reality. As humankind increased in number and their basic needs were more easily met, they grew in knowledge and imagination as well. This created more demand for specially talented individuals to become administrators. The opposing sides increased until, after a surge of hard-to-cope-with humans, The threat steadily tapered off. At one point, it is theorized, people became too busy to dream. Some think that artificial lighting played a role, for it resulted in fewer and shallower hours of sleep. Others blame decreased imagination on a variety of other causes. Whatever the reason, the demand for administrators decreased. Job openings for administrators are, at present, limited, and the screening process is ruthless. Only the most talented. Corbin snatched the tome from between Vetiver's hands. Hey! You're not allowed to touch this. You'll scramble the words. I can only imagine Lloyd's reaction if he saw. I won't mess it up. I follow the 7 rules of a responsible reader. That isn't enough. As a human, anything you handle is at risk of being corrupted. Corbin scooted the books to the other end of the table. Plus, the food's done. He placed the skillet of sizzling fish down on a crocheted potholder. Hop plopped down on the bench next to Vetiver. Let's eat. He dished himself a steaming pink slab of salmon. This is great. Aren't you going to say grace? Vetiver asked. Yeah, Eatsall, come on. Corbin bowed his head and gave thanks. What do people believe on this side of reality? Vetiver asked. What do people believe on yours? Corbin ate a few bites of salmon, then continued. It's not like we have some kind of insight just because we're from this side. It's as disputed as where you come from. Maybe more so. Hop finished his salmon while Corbin spoke. He reached for another piece and Corbin struck him across the knuckles with his greasy fork. Even if you have amnesia, you can remember your manners. Don't be a pig. Ow! Hop clenched his fist. To change the subject, he asked Vetiver, How's the book? It's not too dry, is it? Is there a lot of action? It's pretty dry. But it's so interesting, the writing style hardly matters. I would be convinced all this is real, except... Vetiver held up her fork and focused on it. Slowly, it bent, then writhed back and forth like it was alive. Hey, cut that out. It's dangerous. Corbin had dropped his own fork and was glaring at Vetiver. Okay, you don't have to yell. They finished supper in silence. Then Corbin announced that he was going night fishing. Isn't the weather too nasty? Look for yourself. The water outside the window had calmed while they were eating, and a moon was rising above the gently roiling water. Vetiver had been too absorbed in her book to notice when the wind died down. Can I come? She asked. I would say yes, but... Corbin glanced down at the dirty plates and the oily skillet, with mock surprise. Dishes! I don't know where they come from, but here they are. Can't Hop do them? No, he has his homework. Are you serious? Hop stared at the thick, dusty books. At least read the newspaper. Oh, and Vetiver, make sure you scrape any food scraps and oil into the compost, not the sink. The water's all from a cold spring, so oil will clog the drain. Corbin grabbed the fishing pole from beside the door and went out. Want to trade jobs? Vetiver asked. No, I hate dishes. Hop lifted the frayed, yellowed newspaper with 2 fingers, like it was contaminated. Can you read it out loud, then? Sure. In the course of natural events, one individual invariably rises over another and uses his/her power over the latter to influence the latter's actions. Former Administrator Gomez, I fear, has done just that. What's that even supposed to mean? This isn't like any other newspaper I've read. Oh, the author is Ad J. Fawn, the kid from the meeting today. He must be older than he looks. Why? Vetiver was still miffed that she was doing dishes instead of going on a fishing adventure, but she tried to pay attention to the article rather than to the dirty plates. The water from the pump felt like ice, and she had to scrub hard to get rid of the smeary grease. This article's 5 years old. Gomez is secure within her home territory and appears to be biding her time before mounting a terrorist attack on the portals. Perhaps as a result of energy disruption from the ancient, heavily used portals Gomez has closed, new, unmapped portals have been springing up in unexpected places. Already, unauthorized individuals have been apprehended for unapproved travel to the other side using aforementioned portals. 2 low-ranking officers were convicted of using these new portals in a treasonous manner. These officials, former Lieutenant Robert Weeks and former Lieutenant Isla Weeks, have been stripped of rank and sentenced to a life of hard labor. The suspected traitor, former Administrator Itzal Rajani. Vetiver, that's me, right? I think so. Is still at large. After numerous searches have failed, it is the general consensus that Rajani is hiding on the other side of reality. The bounty on his head has been raised. I didn't realize there was a bounty on you, Vetiver said. She finished drying the last fork and leaned against the counter. If I had known, I would have captured you and turned you in. Hop didn't reply. I wonder what I did. On the reverse page, a black and white picture showed him grinning mischievously, while another was titled Gomez. The photo was fuzzy, but Hop could make out a dark lady adorned with silk scarves. Several beaded necklaces draped around her thin, elegant neck, and more beads were woven into her dreadlocked hair. She had a secretive smile, almost a sneer, and dark, mysterious eyes outlined in black. She looks like someone who could take over the world, Vetiver said, leaning over Hop's shoulder. Do you remember her at all? Maybe. Hop stared hard at the photo, trying to recall anything about Tanith Gomez. No, I can't remember anything. You could really be a spy, and just be leading us on, Vetiver said. The front door opened. Corbin's hands were empty besides the fishing pole. He shut the door, but not before a clammy breeze slipped into the room. No, I've known him forever, and he's not smart enough to lie convincingly. Don't you ever have anything nice to say? Hop frowned. Nope. We should probably get ready for bed. I have a feeling that Maria will have a plan of attack outlined for us by morning. What do you mean? Vetiver asked. For the past 6 years, Gomez has been hiding in her desert stronghold and orchestrating attacks remotely. None of the administrators in the assembly have been up to direct warfare. Maria has to keep things running. Jian Fan couldn't survive a campaign. Lloyd is ancient, and Kat's talents aren't best suited for fighting. I would defeat her myself, but to get to Gomez, I have to go through your hometown, Hysteria Descent. I've tried a few times, but it's too well guarded. Several independent contractors have died trying to get through. My guess is that Maria will send you, me, and 1 or 2 others to try our luck. Why such a small group? Hop wondered. The number of enemies we attract is proportional to the size of our group. A small, high-powered unit is more likely to succeed in this case than a larger, less skilled army. Plus, we don't have a ton of manpower in the first place. Maria could try to contact a different assembly and ask for bodies, but things have been weird everywhere these past 6 years. Things change so quickly, it's all most people can do just to stay stable. And why do you think that having me around will help you? Hop asked. I've lost any memories of fighting, and I won't be able to guide you through the town. Even if I used to live there, I don't remember it now. I don't need you to guide me, really. It's just that Hysteria Descent doesn't like me. You'll help with that. As for fighting, I think you'll remember when you need to. Muscles don't forget as easily as brains. Corbin disappeared into his bedroom and came out a few minutes later with 2 mahogany wool blankets. The assembly only wants to arrest Gomez. If you do die, I'll have an excuse to unalive her. He flicked a blanket out, and it settled, an unwrinkled soft rectangle on the slatted floor. He handed the other blanket to Vetiver. I'm afraid nights on this side will be very dull for you, because you won't be able to sleep. Hopefully you're comfortable in your own head. Stay near Eitzel, and don't touch anything, especially not those books. Speaking of which, Hop asked, do I have to read them all? Also, why do I have to sleep on the floor? We're guests. The answers are yes, and because I said so. You're my brother, remember? Don't expect fancy treatment. I can handle sleeping on the floor, but I really wish there was a Cliff's Notes for this. Cliff's Notes are for cowards, Vetiver retorted. She wrapped the blanket around herself and huddled against the wall beside the warm stove. Corbin said goodnight and closed the door to his room. Hop skimmed Dream Theory for the Intellectual Invalid for half an hour before pendiculating and rolling up in his blanket like a chimichanga. He clasped his hands behind his head and settled into a deep sleep, his first in years. Although Vetiver closed her eyes and tried to relax, sleep wouldn't come. She held still for 15 minutes and entered ninja sleep, but while her senses numbed, her brain was still awake. She watched Hop breathe for a while. It was weird. Did he watch me breathe every night? She wondered. Creepy. I wonder what my parents are doing right now. And the dojo people. She watched the night sky outside the window. A memory popped into her mind. When she was 4, Uncle James had lost track of her in the library. She looked at a book on whales for an hour, hidden behind the non-fiction stacks. When he had finally found her, he'd been frantic. "Stay with me," he had said, hugging her so tight she thought she would pop. Her face had mushed into his MC Escher print tie. "I would rather know you were dead than you disappearing without knowing what happened to you. My parents feel the same way?" The sky was turning the color of iron when something tapped on the door. Vetiver got up as quietly as she could, then grimaced and leaned back against the wall. Her brain couldn't go to sleep, but her legs had. When the tingling in her feet ebbed to a semi-bearable level, she padded to the door. She opened the door a sliver and looked out. A raven stood on the wide step, blinking at her with intelligent, oil-drop eyes. Vetiver opened the door, and he hopped inside. The bird brought along a gust of wind, and after Vetiver closed the door behind him, she let him into Corbin's bedroom. Vetiver turned the handle on the stove, the hinges complaining as she opened it, and dropped in a chunk of driftwood. The door squealed even louder as she shut it, and she heard Hop make a waking up sound. "Is it morning? I feel alive!" His back crunched as he stretched, but he didn't complain about the uncomfortable floor. Corbin entered the room, smoothing his long silver hair with his fingers. "We need to head out as soon as possible," he said. "I have news that Cat will accompany us on our attack. We start at once." "We should eat breakfast first," Hop argued. Vetiver backed him up. "It's the most important meal of the day." "Easily accomplished." Corbin opened a cabinet and slid a mesh basket of gull eggs out. He tapped one on the counter, and tipping his head back, broke it into his mouth, then slurped it down. "I will not do that," Hop said. "I'm not doing that ever." Vetiver demanded, "How can you do that? Aren't you part bird? You're at least 50% cannibal. I can't believe this." Corbin shrugged and rolled his eyes. Guests are so hard to please. He heated a chunk of lard on the stove. When it had gone from solid to liquid, he dropped the 6 remaining eggs from the basket. From her perch at the table bench, Vetiver asked, "I was thinking last night, and I'm wondering this. Can you survive if one of your flock dies?" Corbin sucked air through his teeth as hot oil splattered on his hand. "Ow! Vetiver, that's not your business." He carried the skillet over. To reduce dishes and time, the 3 of them ate out of the skillet instead of from plates. Corbin then dropped the skillet in the sink to soak, and they headed out into the early morning. Vetiver surveyed the landscape while Corbin bolted the door. A gentle, chill breeze rose from the water lapping the gray sand. A few tall beach grasses trembled. Down on the beach, a flock of gulls squabbled over a carcass that had washed ashore. The object of their attention was shrouded in kelp. It looked interesting, but from the intense expression on Hop's face, Vetiver knew asking to look at it would probably not be a good idea. Instead, the trio hurried down the incline and the steps. Corbin opened the door. When Vetiver closed the door, the sound of the ocean ceased. The harsh sea smell was replaced by the musty fragrance of ancient stone. "You got my message, then?" Administrator Cat Sangria was waiting. "Yes," Corbin replied. "What exactly is our plan?" "The Administrator of Dread wants us to form a guerrilla force and apprehend Gomez. If we're unable to do so, we're to bring back information about the front. It's been increasingly dangerous around there. Nobody's made it into Hysteria Descent for the past month. Numbers attract Gomez's forces, so Maria wants us to keep a low profile." Hop wasn't following. "Wait, I haven't finished these books, so I'm not exactly sure what's—" "I'll catch you up as needed." Cat gestured to Vetiver. "Is she coming with us?" "Yes." Vetiver reached out to shake Sangria's hand, but she forgot and offered the wrong hand. "Not again," she cringed. "Sorry, I'm kind of awkward." "No, that's fine." Cat shook her hand. "I'm sure things will be under control with another lefty in the group." She led them deeper into the shaft. "Are you sure it's okay if she comes?" Hop asked. "She's just a little kid." "I don't see any alternatives," Corbin answered in Cat's stead. As they walked, the tunnel dimmed and grew more dusty. Chunks of rock from the ceiling littered the floor, and Hop walked into a gnarly spider web filled with dried-up bugs. Where are we going? He asked as he picked a miller moth out of his eyebrow. We'll go to my house, pack some supplies, perfect our plans, and set out tomorrow. How far is your house? Ow! Vetiver stubbed her toe on a rock. A ways. The portal is shorter, although I'd rather walk in the open air. It's in just a bit. Oh. Cat had nearly walked into a pile of rubble blocking the way. It was so dark in this part of the tunnel that it was almost impossible to see. The ceiling had caved in. How long since you've used this, exactly? Corbin sighed. A few years, I guess. We'll have to go the long way. I'm sorry. Cat turned around. We need to hurry if we're going to get there before dark. Hop started to make a complaining sound, but stopped when he realized it might make him seem uncool. What should I do with the stuff Lloyd gave me? He asked. Do I have time to give it back? No, just leave it by Corbin's door. It took half an hour to get back to the elevator. Vetiver was glad to finally see the landing. The undecorated walls all looked the same, and she'd started to think that maybe she was on a never-ending treadmill. Cat pressed the button and they all crammed inside. Wow, it's beautiful out, Vetiver exclaimed when the door opened and they spilled onto the slope. A flock of sparrows fluttered away as the elevator opened, flashing their iridescent green-blue backs at the newcomers. Morning sun sparkled from drops of dew clinging to the grass. It seemed to Vetiver like a different forest than the one they had slunk through just yesterday. Well, I'll see you all there, Corbin said. He stretched out his arms and his body broke apart. For a moment it looked like he had turned to oil. Then swishing black shapes peeled away and flew up over the tall trees, heading north. In seconds, nothing was left where he had stood besides a few downy feathers drifting to the ground. Can you do that? Vetiver asked Hop. You're his twin, so you should be able to. Hop looked to Cat for an answer. No, of course not. You're fraternal twins, not identical. Let's get going. Cat strode down the hill, her braid bouncing against her back. Hop and Vetiver jogged to keep up with her. How far is your house from here? Vetiver asked. It normally takes me about half a day. They reached the bottom of the mound and entered the trees. In the mottled, humid shadows cast by their branches, it was almost cold. Cat had a relentless stride, and before the morning was old, Hop and Vetiver fell far behind her. She was so far ahead that she disappeared behind trees, but the trail was worn into the forest floor, so it would be hard to get lost. At around 11 o'clock, Vetiver gasped. Why do you think she's in such a hurry? I don't know, Hop responded. Can you catch up and ask her to slow down a little? Why do I have to ask her? Why not you? She'll listen to you. You're in some kind of handedness club. You just don't want to look wimpy. Just ask. Vetiver pushed forward to catch up. Running, especially skipping, seemed somehow to take less energy than jogging or walking fast. She almost crashed into the administrator's broad back. Cat stood in a small clearing, shading her eyes against the sun. What's going on? Vetiver gasped to catch her breath, then told Cat, Hop wants me to ask you to slow down because he's tired. Also, when and what can we eat? Hop caught up. He flicked Vetiver on the forehead. I'm not tired. I thought you looked tired. I don't have any food with me, said Cat, and we don't have time to forage, so we'll need to tough it out. I'll try to slow down a bit, but we have to get back to my house before dark. Why are you so worried about the time? Vetiver asked. Wolves been hanging around after dark. Normally, I get along with all animals, but these don't seem to be normal. I've heard them howling, and a couple days ago I felt eyes on me as I walked from my metalworking shop to the house. The next morning, a dead elk was pulled up onto my porch, and my dogs have been hiding under my bed every night. What does it mean? Asked Hop. It could be Gomez's work, or maybe the general chaos and strife influencing local animals. I'm not sure. Cat pointed. If you look between those two trees, you can see light reflecting from my windows. Hop squinted, then stifled a groan. I can't see. Hop, will you lift me up? Hop picked Vetiver up. It was easier than he'd expected. Oh, man. A mountain range rose in the distance, turning from emerald to blue to violet haze as it receded into the horizon. Snow dusted the top halves of each peak, and the summits were treeless. A flash of light sprang from a clearing when Vetiver turned her head just right. That's a long way. Yes, so we need to keep going. Hey, Eatsall, Cat asked. Why does she call you Hop? Since I forgot my name, she made that one up. I bet you respond to it better than your real name. Maybe that's what everyone should call you from now on." "No," Hop said, "it's silly." Vetiver countered, "She's probably right. In a battle, you'll need to respond to your name immediately. It could be the difference between life and death." "It's a ridiculous name," Hop said, but Cat was already forging ahead. As the day wore on and they neared Cat's house, the air became chilly. Trees grew closer together, and there were more pines than deciduous trees the farther they went. Vetiver began to notice scrapes on the bark and round pellets on the ground, evidence of the elk Cat had mentioned. Starting in the early afternoon, clouds swelled over the sun, and an intermittent breeze raised goosebumps on Vetiver's arms. She felt lightheaded. The hunger pains that had stabbed her insides at noon faded to a dull ache, and her surroundings took on a blurry, surreal cast. "Can we stop and rest?" she asked Hop. "No, remember what Cat said. We need to—" Vetiver tripped on her own shoe and sprawled over. "Ow!" She looked at her hand. Blood beaded up from a shallow cut. "You're worn out, aren't you?" Hop hunkered down and Vetiver crawled onto his back. The trio's speed increased with him carrying her, but the sun sank behind the trees as the ground began to slope upward. "We won't make it." Cat slowed to Hop's speed when it became obvious they wouldn't reach her house before dark. They walked close together, trying to peer through the branches of the surrounding evergreens. A dusting of powdery snow reflected the sun's last pink rays. Hop thought the view would be incredible if it didn't feel like death herself crouched in every deepening shadow. Vetiver's legs bumped against his side with every step. She was half asleep. "I hate feeling afraid on my own land," Cat frowned. Her eyes scanned the snowy path ahead for danger. In the distance, the first wolf howled. Hop froze, and Vetiver's head snapped up. "What was that?" "Let me carry Vetiver," Cat commanded. "But you're a girl, and besides, I'm the one who—" Cat pulled her hunting knife from the leather sheath on her belt. "Sneak." Okay. Hop dropped Vetiver, who winced as she tried to stay upright. Her feet were asleep. Again. "I wasn't threatening you," Cat said, almost grinning despite the situation. She handed Hop the knife. "You're better at fighting than I am." "Oh." Hop took the knife, and Cat picked Vetiver up. "What's happening? Are we almost to the house?" Vetiver wriggled her toes in her shoes. "Not much farther now. See that glow up there? That's—" A shadow flowed over the snow between them and the house. It only appeared for an instant, but all three of them saw it. "I'm going to put you down," Cat whispered. "Okay." Another howl stabbed through the darkness behind them. Vetiver was too afraid to be hungry. She was so afraid she forgot to take warrior breaths. In White Fang, a sled dog musher held off a pack of starving wolves by building a giant fire. By the time someone found him, all his dogs had been eaten, and he was standing in the center of a ring of flames. A song by an old dead man played in Vetiver's head. She felt sick. "Over there!" Vetiver grabbed Cat's sleeve. A gray wolf stood in plain sight just a few yards to their left. Its bright red mouth hung open like it was laughing. It bowed down playfully like a dog, and its tongue lolled almost to the ground. "Give your backs to a tree!" Hop shouted. He waved the knife in the wolf's direction. Another howl sounded close behind him. Hop imagined he felt warm breath on the back of his neck. The visible wolf locked eyes with him. It took one step forward. Vetiver reached for Cat's sleeve, but her fingers just brushed the hand-stitched hem before it was snatched out of her reach. "Ah!" Cat fell to the ground, her boot yanked out from under her by an enormous dark shape. It gave a single, gurgly growl, then dragged her toward the shadows. "Cat?" Hop turned to look, and the instant he broke eye contact with the wolf, it lunged. Something smashed into the small of Vetiver's back, and she pitched face first into the snow. She scrambled, trying to regain her feet, but two wet, cold paws pinned her to the ground. Vetiver felt a twig pressing into her scalp, and icy snow melting down to her collar, and felt slobber shoot under her neck as the wolf snarled, and the horrid smell of wet fur, and somewhere, someone screamed. "Hop?" "Dear God," Vetiver thought, but even as she thought it, she was also thinking, "I won't have time to finish, even though it's a short prayer. Please take—" and then, "Doesn't the brain live for 4 seconds after death? I'll probably be able to finish if that's the case." And then, "What's on my face?" Something hit her shoulders and rolled away, and the wolf didn't have a head anymore, just a stump, and someone was pulling the collapsed body off of her. "Are you all right?" Instead of answering, Vetiver covered her face with her hands and took several long, deep breaths. She opened her eyes and sat up. Cat was helping Hop off the churned snow and dirt. Robert Weeks was talking to him, and Isla Weeks had just asked Vetiver a question of some kind. Huh? Are you all right? Oh, why are you guys here? Isla didn't answer. Hop handed Cat her knife, then the two stumbled over, shaky from the brush with death. What's it doing? Hop pointed to the decapitated body lying next to Vetiver. It quivered and lurched sideways. Vetiver scuttled backwards, nearly tripping in her haste to regain her feet. The corpse heaved upward. Why is it doing that? Vetiver took several steps backward until she bumped into Hop. Reflexes? Hop hazarded. No, said Cat. Something oozed from the wolf's chest cavity. A glistening blob wrenched side to side to dislodge itself. The body deflated, starting with the tail and sagging down until, with a wet plop, a giant clot separated from it, leaving an empty bag of flesh behind. The groom quivered in the snow, seemed to gain its bearings, then took off toward a stand of trees at an impressive clip. I don't believe what we just saw, Vetiver said. It's exactly what I was worried about, said Cat. She lifted up the wolf's head and showed Hop and Vetiver a mark branded in its chin. This wasn't a live wolf, just a puppet. See? She turned it over. The eyes are gone. You should have killed that thing! Vetiver kicked snow at Robert. You might be able to still if you chase after it. It won't die from a blade, Cat explained. That's her blood. If you cut it, it'll just seep back together. Whose blood? Administrator Gomez's. Come on, let's get home.